Hi, I'm Kim. As an experienced design strategist over the last few decades, I've worked with dozens of brands, helping them increase their profitability and improve their business outcomes by looking at their service offering from the outside in, from that customer's perspective. So, I want to show you how to apply these same techniques to your own business. We're all consumers here, so let's think about things from that perspective. I recently went to this new restaurant in my neighborhood. Here's what the experience looked like from initial booking all the way till paying the bill and everything in between. There were a lot of good things about it. The staff was amazing, the ambiance was gorgeous. Some things I was indifferent about, like paying the bill, and then there were some things that were a little bit disappointing. For example, it was really cold in the restaurant, so I had to wear my huge winter coat the whole time. The menus were on PDFs, so we had to scan the QR code, and those are sometimes really hard for me to navigate. The food presentation was kind of poor, so that was disappointing. And the restaurant was really cramped and crowded, so it was very uncomfortable in my seat. At the end of the day, I just didn't feel like I got that experience that I was hoping to have at this restaurant. In my field of human centered design, there is a fundamental concept called value exchange. Customers will deliver value to companies in terms of their business and their money only if they feel like they're getting value in return. Now, this isn't earth shattering. We all understand this. It's Business 101. However, a lot of small to mid sized businesses don't dig far enough into this concept of value exchange. Consumers aren't just weighing price against what they get in terms of physical product or service, they're considering a lot more than that. Like how easy it is to do business with you. Was the experience seamless or was it full of friction and roadblocks? Were they confused? Did they have to ask a bunch of questions to figure out how to use your service? Ultimately, the question will be asked, do they want to work with you again or would they prefer to look for an alternative provider? Here's the thing about value. Our perceptions, our worldview is what form our judgments and help us to assign value to things, whether that is material possessions or business services. So human emotions, not just logic, shape our perceptions and the value we assign to brands and services. Cognitive and behavioral science tells us that customers assess value across 4 dimensions. First, there's the functional value. This is a matter of whether or not the product or service fulfills people's needs. Then, of course, there's economic value. People weigh the benefits against the financial costs. But there's also what we call experiential value, which is based on people's emotional and psychological experiences they have when interacting with a brand. And lastly, we have symbolic value. This is derived from the meaning or identity that people get from working with certain brands. So, for example, people buy high-end luxury handbags because it gives them this symbolic identity to say that they own a designer label bag. So my focus is on the functional and experiential factors of value. For functional value, I'm making sure that your brand and service is solving the right problems for customers and that is actually giving them the utility that they're looking for. In terms of experiential value, I'm looking at how well this is delivered. Is it low effort? Is it transparent? Is it intuitive and enjoyable? These factors influence how people assess brand value. So let's look at what this means for business. This study is showing the ratings that real consumers gave to real brands after interacting with those brands. Here we see a positive correlation between customer satisfaction and people's trust in that brand. So in essence, the more satisfied people are, the more they trust that brand. And that's big because we know that trust influences whether they will continue to do business with you or whether they will advocate for your brand. Speaking of advocacy, the same trend exists for brand advocacy. The more satisfied they are, the more likely they are to recommend you to a friend. And that brings us to likelihood to purchase. The more satisfied they are with their experience, the more likely they are to purchase from you again. So you can see how all of these things are really interconnected and reinforcing. This all brings us to one fundamental truth. Positive emotions enhance perceived value while negative emotions diminish it. That means that some people are willing to pay a premium for services that achieve the same goals as others, but do so with more ease and give them more positive emotions. Let's imagine that I actually scored that restaurant across those value dimensions on a 10-point scale. Now, I had some sense of how much the food cost and what kind of food I was getting, so the functional and economic value were a bit predetermined. I had some sense of the symbolic value, but part of that came with actually going to the restaurant and determining whether I got that sense of identity I was looking for. And lastly, my experiential value rating was, of course, determined by actually visiting, and it didn't really score that well. I didn't get the feeling of relaxation, the feeling of sophistication that I was looking for. So it didn't really meet my needs. I was not comfortable in the restaurant, and I walked away kind of disappointed. So actually, my predetermined functional and economic value assessments were impacted. They were lowered based on my poor experiential factor. And if I were to add this all up together, I would only give this restaurant a 19.5 out of 40 across these value dimensions. Now, of course, I'm explicitly analyzing this. Most people aren't doing this explicitly, but they are doing this. They're doing this subconsciously in their minds, and they're walking away forming judgments, which then impact their future behavior. So, in terms of business strategy, I want to maximize this value proposition as much as possible. Because for businesses, we want our customers to return. Getting a sale is good, but reconverting that sale over and over again is better than losing that sale ever. If we don't serve people well and maximize that value proposition, this leads to lack of trust, poor loyalty, negative reviews, poor word of mouth advocacy, and all of these compounding together have a negative impact on our business, which causes stagnation and lack of growth. It's a lot like having a leaky bucket, where you'll have to continue spending more and more on marketing, trying to replace those customers you've already converted but who have never returned. So, we want to reverse this equation. And the way to do that is by strategically optimizing the experiential value proposition through proactive human centered design. Human centered design is a creative problem solving approach. It's grounded in understanding your customer's needs and goals and evaluating how exactly that experience is delivering perceived value so that we can optimize the value proposition across all four of these dimensions. We always start with a problem, whether it's declining sales, customer churn or poor loyalty, negative reviews, negative brand perception, even things like the amount you're spending on serving your customers. We start with these problems and then we examine them from a human centered design approach, which combines three core tenets to find the underlying issues that cause dissatisfaction and poor perceptions, all of which hamper our business success. First, we look at the business like a system. How does it function? What are the moving parts and processes that deliver the experience and the value to customers? Things like your employees, your computer systems, your physical space. And we look at processes as well to figure out how well the system is operating in the larger context. We also look deeply into your customers, understanding their needs and goals and how the system, that business system, is delivering on these. Then we use these insights to identify problems and design solutions to increase perceived value and optimize the general performance of the business. We form high level strategies based on these insights, and we also implement tactical customer focused solutions. All of this for the purpose of improving performance in the form of increased revenue and decreased operational costs. Too many companies are just rolling the dice in terms of their experience design and their value proposition. But it should not just be about luck, it should be based on strategy. Human centered design offers that strategy through intentional research and optimization. This is how you truly differentiate yourself in the market. In today's world, most businesses have an ecosystem of interaction channels where customers can engage with you and your services. That might be your website, your physical space if you have one, a mobile app, a customer support line. You're probably also communicating with them over email, social media, and text messaging. This holds true whether you're a restaurant, a retailer, or an online subscription service. So think about your business. Do you have a similar ecosystem of various ways in which your customers engage with you? We can use human centered design to focus on any one of these experiences, like the app or the website, for example, and improve the design and performance of those. But it's better to look at how this entire ecosystem works for your customers. Because the reality is that customers are traversing across all of these channels over time to achieve their goals with your business. This is what we call a customer journey. When customers interact across the channels that you offer and across their own devices, both online and in person, to complete their activities. With this reality of modern business and customers traversing this multi channel ecosystem, we see more risk for problems and friction to occur. Even if these individual experiences work well on their own, the connected journey across them is often never explicitly evaluated or designed. So we see things like inconsistent messaging, points in the journey where they have questions that haven't been directly answered, or confusing interfaces along the way. For some businesses, you have just one chance to demonstrate value and create a loyal customer. So, the restaurant experience is an example. But for a lot of businesses, you have a more prolonged set of engagements. And so you have multiple chances to demonstrate or diminish that value assessment. Think of an online subscription service. If it doesn't meet your needs or it's a pain to use, you're probably going to cancel it. Let's look at how a typical customer acquisition funnel works. So, this is just a basic one. The customer sees an advertisement, they do some research, and then they sign up. These acquisition journeys are important in order to convert and bring on new customers. And yes, people are making a value assessment based on this experience. This is often where businesses focus most of their efforts because new customers means immediate revenue. But it's also critically important to not just focus on customer acquisition. It doesn't matter how great this experience is if the ongoing engagements fall short. Watch how these lines shift and change. The more journeys, the more service interactions I have, my value assessment starts to change with each additional customer journey. If these experiences are cumbersome, confusing, or slow, you may end up with a leaky bucket. You want to ensure that this cumulative experience results in a net positive. So let me ask you this. Do you know if your customers feel like it's worth it to be your customer across these value dimensions? And more specifically, do you know what experiential value you deliver? The answer for a lot of companies is no. But in today's competitive landscape where there are a lot of alternatives, this really matters because it's what sets you apart from your competitors. Now, let's walk through a real case study. I had a client, they were a mid size appliance retailer. They had an e commerce website where they sold products, but they also had a network of physical stores within a region, and they were starting to see some declining profitability. And they were starting to notice that they were losing sales to newer, more innovative brands. So I started this engagement with some initial discovery, just to understand the business as a system, what is working and what's not. Then I did staff interviews to get various perspectives from people who worked in the business. I looked at their performance benchmarks like their sales, their average time with customers, how many people were coming in the door, how many sales were converting. So, with this initial discovery, I formed some research questions. And I could focus in on those in my deeper research with their actual customers, which was my next step. I used a combination of research methods to gather insights about the shopping experience. I observed customers in the store as they were going through the experience. I also interviewed people after they made a purchase to get feedback and dig deeper into their perceptions and their mindsets. Through all of this, I identified some problems and I learned how these problems influenced customer perceptions and future behavior. From the customer research, I had some general findings and themes. First of all, customers said that they felt salespeople seemed disorganized, and some felt that the sales folks were not as knowledgeable as they should be. They reported feeling uncertain and uninformed throughout the process. Several customers also complained about receiving irrelevant communications. For example, after they bought a product, then they would get a marketing email about that product. And lastly, and this was a big one, they felt their time was not being respected. In looking at their benchmarks, we calculated that the average sales interaction took 20 to 25 minutes. This inefficiency led to lost revenue opportunities and it impacted the overall business performance. I also took a good hard look at the experience with an expert design audit. I went through the purchase journey on my own as if I were a new customer, and I observed where the experience wasn't following best practices. Here are just a few things I found. One big problem was that the sales application their staff was using was outdated. It was slow and it just did not give the salespeople access to the information they needed. So they didn't have the right product information or stock information, which meant they were running around checking information on backroom computers and waiting for stock checks from the warehouse workers. All of this resulted in those long interactions that the customers were complaining about. Customers also reported that following their purchase, the scheduling interface for installation was not intuitive, and it led to a bunch of scheduling errors. After all this data gathering, I analyzed these collective insights by triangulating findings, drawing parallels, and forming conclusions about the root causes for the customer dissatisfaction. Then we were able to create a strategy for improvement. One major improvement was a redesigned sales platform. And we made sure that it was tailored to the real life scenarios that staff were encountering on the sales floor. We enabled quick product lookups, we improved the stock availability information, and we also enabled it to generate product comparisons that they could show to customers right there on the sales floor for a visual comparison, something like you might see online. And then we allowed them to send personalized summaries of all the products these customers were interested in so that they could review it at home and, yes, convert and purchase them online. We also looked at their sales processes to identify the bottlenecks and create solutions to streamline those processes. We improved their ability to track their customer interactions, which then enabled for more relevant and personalized ongoing interactions and communications. And lastly, we made some improvements to their customer-facing systems to increase transparency after an order was made. So customers felt more informed while waiting for delivery and installation. The business saw measurable gains in conversion rates, and they saw increased revenue across all store locations. The new application significantly improved staff efficiency, and it reduced the time it took to serve each customer, which meant more productivity and more sales. Interestingly, the sales team also said that they were more confident. They were now equipped with the things that they needed to do a good job for their customers, which naturally improved these sales interactions overall. Our efforts also decreased the time to serve, which directly influenced that perception that customers felt their time wasn't being respected. We also saw a notable decrease in poor customer reviews on those third-party review platforms. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, we also saw that they were experiencing less employee churn. Previously, they had dealt with a lot of turnover in their sales staff, but now, with salespeople feeling more productive and more empowered, they were losing fewer staff. And that meant that they were spending less time and money recruiting and training new people. So, this case study demonstrates the really strong business case for human-centered design. Shifting your perspective to a customer-focused view enables you to serve people better and just improve the value proposition you offer. This kind of reset on your business operations and experience delivery can totally flip that equation we saw earlier and result in positive business outcomes over the long term. Here's the thing. Large companies employ these kinds of strategies every day. They have entire teams of researchers and designers whose job it is to optimize business through human-centered strategies. As a consultant, I've worked with all of these brands you see on the screen, applying these exact strategies to boost their business performance. But it doesn't have to be something employed just by big business. I want to make these strategies accessible to all businesses. In fact, you can often see bigger impact in small and moderate sized businesses because there's just less bureaucracy and red tape to navigate. So you can actually get things done and see positive impact sooner. So it's time to look at your value proposition from the outside in and deliver experiences that keep your customers coming back for more. Book a free call with me to discuss how I can help you take your business to the next level.